right now, we move to more tangible renewable energy projects.
Okay.
I think I can't disclose it right now
Sure.
because I just signed the NDA, but I can assure you.
The Business Lab.
Welcome, listeners, to yet another episode of the Business Lab podcast. And I have a very special guest today, none other than Pak Billy Anugrah from the Indonesian Embassy of Singapore. Welcome, Pak, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Sofian.
Today's episode is sponsored by our venue sponsor, ID Entity and Craft by 3, and of course our media magicians, StudioFive Corp. Thank you so much for sponsoring us. We could not have this episode without you guys. Alright, so Pak Billy Anugrah is Indonesia's Trade Attaché in Singapore, and they promote bilateral trade and investment here in Singapore and within two countries. He has over 20 years of experience in both government and private sectors, focusing on trade policy, and he holds a master's in public policy, and he has served in various strategic roles in trade negotiations. Pak, to kick things off, Pak, what does a trade attaché actually do?
Okay. Thank you, Sofian, for having me on this wonderful podcast. The Trade Attaché is one of the so-called marketing arm and also diplomatic arm from the Ministry of Trade of Indonesia. So we are currently we have more than 22 trade attachés in all over countries, mostly in the countries where they are strategic trade partners of Indonesia. Other than the trade attaché, we also have the Indonesia Trade Promotion Center. We have around 14 offices, and that is mostly in the business cities. Mm-hmm. So our main task or our main objective is to strengthen the bilateral trade between Indonesia and also the country that we are posted in, and also to facilitate the business side from both countries, trying to facilitate them for getting the better market access, better understanding of the regulation, and also increasing trade, export and import.
That sounds like a tall order.
More or less, yes.
I'm sure it's not easy. What are some of the day-to-day challenges that you have to face when in your line of work, Pak?
The biggest challenge has always been identifying the market or the business scalability of every potential there is. Because every day, not just me in Singapore, but all of my colleagues, other trade attachés all over the world, we receive at least like hundreds of like business inquiries or business potential that we need to be hands-on. And to identify which one has the biggest business potential, which one has the biggest challenges and everything, that would be its own obstacles, because it takes time and efforts and lots of like analytical thinking to get through all of that. And the second would be how to navigate ourselves to the recent trend from the countries that we are posted in, the recent regulations, regulatory framework, and also lots of other non-technical barriers in terms of trade. So yeah, that's our day-to-day basis, and also the common obstacles that we face every day.
Okay, interesting. I wanted to zoom in on the first point
Sure.
that you mentioned when you talk about analyzing markets and opportunities. What's the typical process like for you? What's top of mind whenever you're making such a decision?
So usually when it comes to decision-making process, I always focus on three things.
Okay.
The market scalability,
Okay.
and the ability of the industry in Indonesia to cope with it. And also the third one is the regulation or the policy is supportive enough for this business. For instance, if we talk about the export and import, some of the products in Indonesia has its own regulation. It can be in the form of licensing, it can be in the form of standards, it can be in the form of any other forms, non-technical barriers. Same thing in Singapore. We have to comply to certain standards, certain quality of products. So the three things that I used to take usually involves, is this feasible to do in the short term or medium term? And is this promising in the sense of like business scalability, and will it be sustainable business or not? Because our objective is to aim more to more sustainable business rather than just like one or two business deal and then off.
Right.
There's no sustainability in that. So we want to encourage the industry in Indonesia. We want to encourage the all the small businesses in Indonesia. We want them to be elevate into be able to compete in the global level. So that's our main objective. And also we want to give more opportunity to the foreign business to enter Indonesia market without any obstacles. So we make sure that all of the information, all of the regulatory framework policies are on their side. So that's exactly my day-to-day and my how-to every day.
Okay. So interesting. I wanted to zoom in. You mentioned that, you look at whether it's sustainable or not. So the question looms, right? What makes a company or potential business sustainable or not? What are the checkboxes that you have to tick?
Okay. The keyword will be value chain.
Okay.
That will be the first checkbox that I have to make sure that it's on the table.
Okay.
If we talking about just the trade between Singapore and Indonesia, a decade ago, we are still quote unquote trapped in trying to sell like our own products without knowing whether it would be acceptable in the destination countries. Will it be hope to the certain standards, certain qualities of the destination countries? We don't think that we are able to produce someone else's products.
Okay.
But after that, after we integrate ourselves to a wider value chain, starting from the regional value chain in ASEAN countries and then from the global to the global value chain, we understand that the modern trade nowadays is not about competing between one product A to product B.
Yes.
Right now, it's how country A and country B can combine each of other resources and make one product that can be acceptable for any other countries. That will be the current dynamic of trade right now, and will be the future of the trade.
Wow.
I still remember 10 years ago, we're still trying to sell like our own brand of, this is very simple example.
Okay, sure.
Our very brand of snacks.
Okay.
We're selling in a probably same price as the snacks here in Singapore. We insist we have to use this brand, our own brand. And then it turns out we only sold probably like 2 containers within 3 years, and that's it. Same company, when I got here in Singapore last year, I helped them to more engage into a private label partnership.
Okay.
Into a value chain framework. So I helped them to meet with the Singapore brand. And then Singapore brand agrees, they've met several times, and right now, same company producing the snacks for that Singapore brand and already export to Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea.
Wow.
That kind of business model is more sustainable for both sides. For Singapore brand, they get more benefit because, of course, if you produce in Indonesia, you have lower production costs for sure, with the closer to the resources, for sure. And for Indonesian brand, it's more sustainable. They don't have to think, okay, how will I sell my products again next month, next 3 months? No. Every business model in the form of value chain, it has to be either 6 months minimum or at least 1 year contract. And it helps both companies to grow together while expand their market into more wider market.
Wow.
So that's kind of business that I'm
This
trying
sounds
to pursue.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, we need to understand how the interior design industry works here in Singapore. So majority of the IDs or the people who work within the interior design companies, most of them are actually freelancers. They are not employed based on a full-time basis, so they work on a commission basis. So, and some business models or some ID companies want to have a lot of ID so that they can close a lot of projects on. My personal tip here is start with visiting the IDs that you have shortlisted or you're interested in. Look at their place of work, look at how they work, look at their office. Once you have done that, I think what you should also do here is to ensure that these IDs that you potentially want to engage are HDB licensed. Last but definitely not least, and to me the most important, because I think nobody do this.
Okay.
Okay. Once you have confirmed, or let's say for example, you really want to sign with this ID company, right? Go to Anugrah website and pull out the company's profile. Firstly, you know who are the directors, you know where is their office, you know when they were incorporated. Most importantly, you know how much they actually put in as the initial investment or the capital. So in the context of my industry, right, the ID industry, right, I always advise my clients, don't look for cheap, look for value. Okay? Because cheap don't guarantee you that you're gonna get what you want. Okay? Because in order to be cheap, there are corners that I need to cut. But instead look for value. And when I talk of value here, it's not just what I use to build your home, how I communicate with you, how prompt am I, you know, how I can advise you. You know, these are all the value I add. You know, so like for us, because I maintain a very small team, right? So we only manage between 2 or 3 projects a month. We don't do a lot of projects. Okay. So this way, my people are better at managing that project. We are at site more frequent. We are constantly there to check if there are mistakes being made. You know, and our communication with the owners are more frequent, more kira macam more in depth. We are able to correct.
I'd like to put it out there that perhaps not everyone thinks that way. Yeah. You mentioned initially the company wanted to push their own products. Yeah. Right? How do you get from there, that point A to point B, from point A being you pushing your own products to point B where the ultimate point where you mentioned you're collaborating? Yeah. What does it take to get from A to B?
Well, my job in Singapore, this is my second post. My first post was in Chicago. And from there, I realized that the world of trade has changed. The world is getting closer. The globalism helps everyone can be able to contribute to each production line, each of the value chain line.
Okay.
So when I get to Singapore, I realize both Indonesia and Singapore have a very mutual comparative advantage. Indonesia, we are blessed with probably big market, big domestic market, has been our backbone ever since. Also, we have more competitive labor cost, labor structure. We have all the technology, we have all the production line. But we also admit that we are addressing our own weaknesses. We don't have strong brand presence. We don't have the technology. We don't have the market access that Singapore has. Those 3 things are the strength that Singapore has. Singapore has more brand presence. If you're selling product A that comes from Singapore and this is Singapore brands, it's more accessible, more acceptable in developed markets. Markets like EU, markets like America, markets like Japan, South Korea. But if you produce it in Singapore, of course, the price won't match. You would suffer to suddenly surge of capital and production costs. That's why by mixing, by collaboration to a certain business model, this way could benefit for both countries. Right now, this is the only business model that I pursue. Right now. My terms in Singapore are only 3 years, so I have to make use of my time very well.
Right.
After identifying those issues in my first 3 months in here in Singapore, then I go all out with it. Right now, we are closely collaborating with all the business association, including the SMCCI. We're collaborating with certain business association in Singapore to bring them to Indonesia to move their production line. I always tell them, if you're not confident enough with Indonesia, start just buying products from us. Let us do it. Once you're getting your confidence, produce with us. Produce your products in Indonesia. Once you get full confidence, the full picture of the market in Indonesia, start investing in us.
Right. So it's step by step before you get that conviction.
Yeah. Any growth, any healthy and sustainable business growth doesn't come overnight. It has to be gradually within years.
Okay. So I think our listeners tuning in probably will be like, okay, that's a great idea, but who is this not for? Perhaps this model of value chain is not for certain types of businesses.
Yes.
Would you say?
It's not, but I think in the modern days of trade,
Yeah.
it covers almost every line of businesses and every line of products. You name it. At least from my point of view, the products that I've never thought that Indonesia can produce right now, we are able to produce.
Wow.
Last month, I just had a meeting with one of the aircraft supplier here in Singapore.
Okay, interesting.
They said we found 2 Indonesian companies that can only produce certain small types of screw that's needed for the aircraft.
Okay.
And then how is that possible? How is that only Indonesian? They said only in Southeast Asia, only these 2 companies that can produce it. But the problem is they don't have license. In order to supply to certain aircraft, because of the safety measures and everything, you need to have license. So what happened is that they send the raw material to Indonesia, to these 2 companies. They put a little bit of process, send it again to companies in Singapore, and companies in Singapore just stamp it with, okay, this is license.
Okay.
As simple as that. That's the kind of thing that I think right now, if you can go with the smallest product as screw, I think you can pretty much like covers everything.
From snacks to screws.
From snacks to screws, yeah.
Right? Okay, that's interesting, and I love the fact you shared that little anecdote. I'm curious to know, and probably the viewers are wondering, which industries would probably fare better in the Indonesian market if there are Singaporean companies going overseas? Yeah.
For Singaporean businesses, I always start with the probably industries that I think Indonesia's industry has the capability and also has the capital to be partner with Singaporean businesses, which is F&B, FMCG, and energy sector. Those 3 are right now kind of like the most vital businesses in Indonesia. For food and beverage, we have, I think from the last 5 years, is one of the sector that with the healthiest growth. So average probably 10.1% growth every year annually. So FMCG, same thing, because the main component of most of the FMCG products are the palm oil. We are the biggest palm oil producer, and also lots of other raw materials and derivative products that comes from palm oil that we can produce. So it just makes sense to produce it in Indonesia. The third one would be energy. Energy, I would probably emphasize in the renewable and green energy. I think right now we have, I think since after the COVID, Indonesia and Singapore has agreed to align our energy policy into more renewable and green energy. And so we pivot right now. We move to more tangible renewable energy projects.
Okay.
I think I can't disclose it right now because
Okay.
I just signed the NDA, but I can assure you that the Singapore, we are in full support of all the renewable energy or the green energy that Singapore is aiming for the next 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
And we are fully committed to that. And we are right now working on the details on collaborating with Singapore to certain various projects that will be very exciting and will be one of the biggest in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's an NDA here. So.
I'm sorry. I'm bound to the legal documents of NDA. So.
Okay, interesting. So we've covered several sectors.
Yes.
You did mention F&B and so fast-moving goods as well. So I'm also very curious to know, besides these industries,
Your breath just next to my soul. I wanna feel your breath without it.
What are some of the policies already in place to help businesses expand to Indonesia and likewise for Indonesian businesses to come here to Singapore? What are some of the policies that business owners should be aware of?
Okay. For the Singaporean businesses, I always tell them that Indonesia is a big market. It's not an easy market. I have to admit that. I'm fully aware that Indonesia is not an easy market, but we always find our way to navigate the businesses in Indonesia. If you look at the trend nowadays in the global market, most of the emerging markets are the market that has the biggest population and has the youngest demographic structure. Think of that countries like probably 5 years ago, 10 years ago, China started with that.
Right.
Now emerging markets like India, like Brazil, probably Pakistan, and also including Indonesia. People always aiming to the biggest market that has the biggest population. Indonesia population right now is 280 million, with more than 95 million are the middle class, with the most consumptive market. Added to that, the median age for Indonesian population right now is 29 years old, 29.1 years old. So we still have like a long span, probably like 10 to 15 years of more like productivity. We have to utilize it very, very well. That's why since 10 years ago, we have developed the certain policy that can be support of our productivity, support of our industry, and this is the one key policy that's very important, downstreaming.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Downstreaming means we don't want to just export the raw material, raw natural resources. We want it to be more added value products. We want it to be more technological products because we want to be involved in that process. We want to also get the knowledge. We also want the technology. We no longer want just, okay, we have this from our, let's just say, for example, mining products.
Yes.
We have nickel, we have tin, we have bauxite, everything. But if we keep exporting that, there's no added value that we get. That's why we introduced the downstreaming policy. We are no longer can export raw material. In mining products, agriculture products, it has to be processed in Indonesia. It needs to have added value. Therefore, we need the capital, we need technology, we need partners. And one of them is being Singapore. Singapore, I think since the last decade, has always been the biggest investor in Indonesia. Wow. So the biggest FDI always comes from Singapore. Last year, I think it closest to 1.3 billion direct investment. Always the highest. And it reflects to our posture of export. 2002, our export only reaches probably 67.8 billion US dollars. But since 10 years ago, we introduced certain sets of policies. Downstreaming policy, we set the standard, we cutting all the red tapes regarding the licensing process, the business process. So we make all the processing that related to administrative process easier. Now we get the benefit from the export values.
Okay.
2002, 67.8 billion. Right now, our export just last year, 295 billion.
Wow.
And not just that, not just from values. Back in the days, 2002, our main export would be traditional mining products, coal, just palm oil probably. Last year, our second biggest export is stainless steel. Our fifth largest export is automotive products, cars, vehicles, spare parts, and lots of other things that are industrial-based products. So that's what we want.
Wow.
Therefore, we need we need a partners that we can collaborate with. We need more Singapore businesses to work with us in Indonesia.
Well, Billy, sounds like there's a lot of growth and evolution here.
Yes.
Where do you see this growth and evolution going? What's the trend like in the future?
Well, hopefully it leads to all the projection that the World Bank has made and then the IMF has made. Based on several sources, right now our GDP of Indonesia is 1.3 trillion. Back in from the recent analysis, in 2030, our GDP will reach about 2.2, 2.3 trillion. If we achieve that, we will be the 4th largest economy in the world.
Oh.
But it's not an easy task. Again, it's not an easy task. It has to be, supported by not just the economical metrics, but also social metrics, political metrics, lots of other things. So we already have a set of policies that put in the table that already implemented for years, which I think going to the right trajectory, which is the downstreaming policy, standards, and then a more efficient business process.
Yeah.
We're now aiming for elevating our human resources. We get more skilled workers.
Yeah.
I think right now we are hiring some foreign talents here and there in the new sectors like AI, sectors like precision engineering, sectors like probably computing, cloud computing, and everything. So we want to get the best talents. Right now, I think not just Indonesia, I think Singapore is on the race right now. I think they started it like even before COVID. They start recruiting all the best talent from the world in the new emerging sectors. I think that will be the key to not win the fight, but that will be the key to maintain the economic growth until the next decade.
Talent.
Right.
Beautiful. So I think we ended off on a very good note. Talent, it will be the future, and that's the trend that you're projecting.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Pak Billy, again for joining us for this podcast.
No,
We'd like to thank our sponsors, the venue sponsor, Craft by 3 and ID Entity, and of course our media magicians, StudioFive Corp. Thank you so much for the production quality and value and the set that you guys see here. Please share, like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast you see, and wherever you find it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can share it to your friends. There's also a description. You might see a description box below, so that we can improve the episodes. You can click on that and help us to improve the episodes that you see. With that, thank you so much, Pak. And thank you so much.
Sofian.
We'll see you
Thank
for the next
having me.
episode. Bye-bye.